I know a guy named Walt, retired mechanic, 31 years at the same shop, and the week before his last day he told me he felt like he was about to jump off a boat without checking if the water was actually water. No more paycheck. No more direct deposit showing up like clockwork whether he liked his boss that week or not. Just him, whatever he'd saved, and a very long stretch of Tuesdays. 2 years later, Walt pulls up his accounts on a whim, half expecting to see the number sliding, the way everybody warned him it would. It wasn't sliding. It was higher than the day he walked out of that shop for the last time. And Walt is not some unicorn. The Federal Reserve runs the actual numbers on this. Households where the head of the house is 65 to 74 sit at a median net worth of $409,900. Compare that to the group just younger, the 55 to 64 crowd, still grinding through their last working years. Their median is $364,500. The people who stopped working are, on paper, worth more than the people still clocking in. Nobody explains that part on the way out the door. You spend 40 years being told to save, 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 brace for the drawdown, and then you retire, and somehow the number goes up. So either the math is broken or something's happening that nobody bothered to walk you through. Turns out it's the second one, and once you see the pieces, you'll probably recognize every single one of them from your own life. First piece of it, and it's the biggest one, is sitting under your own roof, literally. Most of our generation bought a house sometime back when a starter home didn't require winning the lottery, and then did the extremely dramatic thing of living in it. Maybe redid the kitchen once, argued about the carpet. That's about it. And while you were doing absolutely nothing heroic, just paying it down, mowing the lawn, ignoring the guy who kept knocking about the driveway, that house was quietly making you richer than a lot of investments you actually had to think about. Harvard's own housing researchers track this, and the number is not subtle. Median home equity for homeowners 65 and older hit $250,000 in 2025. 3 years earlier, it was $170,000. That's a 47% jump in 3 years. While you did nothing but keep the gutters clean. I've got a neighbor, Frank, hasn't touched a paintbrush on that house since the Clinton administration. Kitchen's still got the same cabinets, and Frank's house is worth more than double what he paid for it, and every dollar of that just walks straight into his net worth column without him signing a single form. Here's the part that actually matters for you. Home equity isn't a number you check like a stock ticker. It doesn't ding your phone when it goes up. So it sits there, quietly compounding in the background, while you're busy assuming your money is only the number in the brokerage account. It isn't. For most people, our age, the house is the single biggest asset on the sheet, bigger than the 401k, bigger than the IRA, bigger than all of it combined for a lot of households. So when you retired and braced for the number to start sliding, the house wasn't part of that plan. It just kept doing what it's been doing since before you retired at all. You didn't get richer because you did something clever. You got richer because you own a roof, and roofs, it turns out, have had a very good few years. Second piece. And this one's got nothing to do with the stock market. It's just, you got cheaper, not on purpose. It just happened. Think about what working actually cost you. Gas or a train pass just to show up. Lunches you bought because you didn't have time to pack one. The clothes you needed for a job that had opinions about what you wore. The dry cleaning. The coffee you bought because the meeting started at 7 and you weren't a functioning human without it. None of that was fun spending. It was just the cost of having a job, and you paid it every single week without ever writing it down as a line item. Retire, and that whole category evaporates. You didn't decide to be frugal. The expense just stopped existing. There's actual research on this, and it's got a name. Economists call it the retirement spending smile. And it comes out of work by a retirement researcher named David Blanchett. What he found, tracking real households, is that spending drops in real terms by about 1% a year through a big chunk of retirement. Not because people are white-knuckling a budget, but because the money just naturally stops going out the door for things a job required. On a household starting with a $100,000 budget, spending bottoms out around age 84 before it ticks back up again. And that later uptick is healthcare, which is its own conversation for another day. So picture your own version of it. the work wardrobe you don't replace anymore, the gas tank that lasts 3 weeks instead of 1, the lunches you make at home because frankly, you've got the time now. None of that feels like saving money. It just feels like Tuesday. But add it up over a year, and it's real money that used to leave your account automatically. And now it just doesn't. You stopped earning a paycheck, sure, but you also quietly stopped paying rent on having a job. And that second part is worth more than people give it credit for. Third piece, and this one's my favorite because it's the government, basically, forcing you to get richer whether you want to or not. Here's how it works. If you've got a 401k or a traditional IRA, the IRS doesn't let you leave that money in there forever. Eventually, you have to start pulling it out. They call it a required minimum distribution, but eventually is doing a lot of work in that sentence because the age they actually make you start is 73. And under the newer rules, that age climbs to 75 by 2033. That's the IRS's own rule, not a suggestion. Now stack that against what you already know about how investing works. Money that isn't being pulled out is money that's still fully invested, still riding the market, still compounding, still doing the thing compounding does, which is get bigger the longer nobody interrupts it. Walt, from the top of this video, he left his 401k completely alone from the day he retired at 65 until the year he turned 73. 8 years of growth, untouched. Because nobody made him take $1 out and he never got around to needing to. That's not some clever tax strategy Walt cooked up on a whiteboard. He just didn't withdraw because he didn't have to, and the account kept doing what accounts do when you leave them alone. The IRS accidentally gave millions of retirees an 8-year head start on getting richer, purely by not requiring anything of them yet. If you've been almost afraid to look at that account since you retired, turns out that's not a mistake. That's the system working exactly the way it's built to. Fourth piece, and this one's less about your money and more about a number that's been quietly messing with your head for years. You've probably seen the headlines. The average retiree is worth $1,790,000. And if you read that and thought, well, that's not me, not even close, I must be doing this wrong. Hold on, because that number isn't what it looks like. That figure is the average. And an average gets dragged around by whoever's at the extreme end of it. Picture 10 of us at a diner. 9 of us have a completely normal retirement, a paid-off house, some savings, a Social Security check. And the 10th guy used to run a company and is worth $40 million. Add us all up, divide by 10, and suddenly the average person at that table is a multimillionaire. Except 9 of us aren't. That one guy just did all the heavy lifting on the math. That's exactly what's happening with that number you saw in the headline. The Federal Reserve's own survey, this is where these numbers actually come from, also tracks the median, which is the person standing right in the middle of the line, not the average pulled by the wealthiest few. And the median for a 65 to 74-year-old household is $409,900. That's the number that actually describes somebody like you. Not the guy who sold a company, you. So the next time some article makes you feel like you're behind because you're nowhere near $2 million, you're not behind. You are being compared to a number that barely describes anybody. You're probably a lot closer to normal than the headline wanted you to feel. And normal, it turns out, is doing just fine. Fifth piece. And I'll be honest, this is the one that surprised me when I first read it. About 1 in 3 retirees reach their mid-80s with their original savings still fully intact. Or more than they started with. Not still had some left. Still had it all. 20 years into retirement, and the account looks basically the same or bigger than the day they stopped working. Now, I used to assume that was just wealthy people being wealthy. Turns out that's not really it. The researchers who study this, EBRI, the group that actually surveys retirees about why they do what they do, ask people flat out, why haven't you touched your savings? And the answers are not what you'd guess. Fear of running out of money, the thing everybody assumes is driving this, came in dead last at 27%. What actually topped the list? 38% said they're keeping it in case something unforeseen comes up later. 37% said they just don't feel like they need to touch it. A third said they want to leave something behind. And 31%, nearly a third, said plainly they just feel better when the balance stays high. Read that again. Almost a third of retirees aren't protecting themselves from a disaster. They just like seeing the number where it is. That's not fear. That's a preference. So if you've been sitting on your savings, half guilty about it, like you're supposed to be spending it down by now, like there's a rule book somewhere you're failing to follow, there isn't. You're doing exactly what a third of people your age are quietly doing. You're not behind. You might just be one of the ones who ends up richer at 85 than you were at 65. Sixth piece, and I want to slow down for this one because everything so far has been good news, and good news alone would be a little dishonest. Here's the honest part. The net worth number climbing, that's real. The house is real. The untouched 401k is real. But there's a researcher group, EBRI, that tracked actual retirees for 30 years, following the same households from the day they retired all the way through. And what they found about the actual savings, the money sitting in the brokerage account, the IRA, the stuff that isn't the house, is that it drops. Not a little. 20 to 22 years into retirement, the typical household's non-housing savings had fallen by 30 to 43%. And that held true whether the household started retirement with a little or a lot. So the number that's going up on your net worth statement and the number that's actually shrinking in your savings account, those are two different numbers. Most of what's carrying that richer headline is the house, plus a handful of very wealthy households pulling the average sky high. The actual cash, the part you could spend tomorrow if you needed to, is quietly getting smaller for most people, even while the total looks bigger. I'm not telling you this to take the good news back. It's still true. You're likely worth more than you were the day you retired. But if you've been picturing your retirement as one number climbing steadily forever, that's not quite it. The house is doing more of the lifting than the portfolio is. Worth knowing which part of the number is actually yours to spend, and which part is sitting under your roof waiting for you to sell it. And there's a second wrinkle worth naming here, too. A growing number of us aren't even holding that house free and clear anymore. Back in 1989, about a quarter of homeowners 65 to 79 still had a mortgage. Today, it's closer to 41%, nearly half. So for a real chunk of retirees, that big equity number sitting under the roof isn't fully theirs to spend either. There's still a payment coming out every month, still a balance sitting against it. I bring this up because Walt, one more time, Walt's mortgage was paid off 5 years before he retired. That's not luck exactly, but it's not nothing either. It's part of why his version of this story worked out clean. If yours isn't paid off yet, none of the other 5 pieces stop being true. The house is still building equity. The account is still compounding untouched. You're still probably closer to that median number, the 409,000, than the scary near 2 million headline. It just means the house piece of your number comes with an asterisk that Walt's didn't have. And knowing which asterisk applies to you is worth more than pretending it doesn't exist. So go back to Walt. He didn't get richer because he found some trick nobody else knew about. He got richer because he owned a house that quietly did what houses have been doing since 2019. Because he stopped bleeding money on the cost of having a job. Because he left his 401k alone for 8 years simply because nobody made him touch it. And because, like a third of people his age, he just never felt the need to spend the whole thing down. That's it. That's the whole secret, not a strategy. Just what happens when you stop working and let a few things sit still. Doesn't mean everything about the number is simple. You heard the other side of it too, the part where the actual savings shrink even while the total looks bigger, but that's exactly why it's worth knowing both halves instead of just the headline. So here's what I actually want to know. Have you really looked, at your net worth since you retired? Or is that one of those things you've been putting off because you're not sure you want to know? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone,